The stars looked different from the bridge of the USS Horizon as Captain Jake Morrison watched the alien ship approach. It was huge and made of what looked like crystal and metal mixed together. The ship moved without making any sound through space, and it glowed with a soft blue light that hurt to look at for too long. Jake had been waiting for this moment his whole life. Humanity had finally built ships that could travel faster than light, and now they were about to meet their first alien race. He adjusted his uniform and tried to look calm, but his heart was beating fast. Behind him, his crew worked quietly at their stations, all of them knowing that history was being made right now. Lisa Carter stood next to him, holding a tablet with translation software that the science team had worked on for months. She was the best diplomat Earth had, and if anyone could make a good first impression, it would be her. Dr. Ben Rodriguez was also on the bridge, his eyes wide with excitement as he watched the readings from his instruments. The alien ship was 10 times bigger than the Horizon, and it seemed to be scanning them with invisible beams of energy. Jake could feel the scan moving over his ship like fingers touching everything. It made him uncomfortable, but he knew they had to show they were peaceful and willing to talk. A voice suddenly filled the bridge, speaking perfect English but with a strange musical tone that sounded like wind chimes. The translator had worked perfectly. "Small vessel from the third planet, you will prepare to be boarded for examination. We are the Zenthari Collective. Do not resist or attempt to flee." Jake looked at Lisa, who nodded slightly. This was not exactly how they had hoped first contact would go, but they had expected the aliens might want to study them first. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth Space Navy," Jake said into his communicator. "We come in peace and wish to establish friendly relations with your people." There was a long pause before the voice came back. "Your intentions are noted. Prepare for transport." A bright light filled the bridge, and Jake felt his body become light and tingly. The next thing he knew, he was standing in a huge room made of the same crystal material as the alien ship. The walls seemed to glow from inside, and the air felt different, cleaner somehow, but also strange. 3 aliens stood before them. They were tall, at least 8 feet high, and their bodies looked like they were made of living crystal mixed with metal. Their faces were long and narrow, with eyes that glowed like stars. They moved slowly and carefully, as if they had all the time in the world. The one in the middle stepped forward. "I am High Arbiter Kethmore of the Zenthari Collective. You are the first of your species we have encountered. We have observed your planet from a distance for some time." Lisa stepped forward and bowed slightly. "We are honored to meet you, High Arbiter. We hope this can be the beginning of friendship between our peoples." Kethmore looked at her for a long moment, then at Jake and Ben. "Friendship," he repeated the word as if he was testing how it sounded. "An interesting concept. Tell us about your species." For the next several hours, the humans answered questions about Earth, about how long humans lived, about their technology, their wars, their art, and their dreams. The Zenthari listened carefully to everything, sometimes asking for more details about things that seemed to puzzle them. Jake noticed that the aliens seemed most interested in how short human lives were. They asked the same questions about human lifespan several times, as if they could not believe the answers. Finally, Kethmore spoke to the other 2 Zenthari in their own language, which sounded like music mixed with the sound of breaking glass. Then he turned back to the humans. "Your species is very young," he said. "We have existed for over 50,000 of your years. Our individual lives span many thousands of your years. We have seen entire civilizations rise and fall while we remained unchanged." "That must give you great wisdom," Lisa said politely. "Indeed it does," Kethmore replied, "which is why we can see clearly what your species is. You are fragile beings. Your bodies are soft and easily damaged. Your lives are brief, like sparks that flicker and die. Your emotions control you instead of you controlling them. You fight among yourselves constantly, even when you should work together." Jake felt his face get hot with anger, but he kept quiet. This was Lisa's job. "We may have our challenges," Lisa said carefully, "but we also have strengths. We adapt quickly. We are creative. We never give up when something is important to us." The High Arbiter made a sound that might have been laughter. "You speak of adaptation, yet your species has barely learned to leave its home planet. You speak of creativity, yet your technology is primitive compared to ours. You speak of never giving up, yet your wars prove you give up on peace regularly." Ben could not stay quiet anymore. "We may be young, but we learn fast. Give us a chance to show you what we can do." Dr. Rodriguez is right, Jake added. We may not live as long as you do, but we make our short lives count. Cathamore studied them with his glowing eyes. Perhaps. But the galaxy is vast and dangerous. Your fragile species needs protection and guidance. We offer you a place under our care. We will share some of our technology with you. We will protect you from threats you cannot handle yourselves. In return, you will acknowledge our leadership and follow our guidance in galactic matters. The three humans looked at each other. This was not what they had hoped for. They had wanted to meet aliens as equals, not to be treated like children who needed babysitting. What if we refuse? Jake asked. Then you will remain isolated on your small planet until you grow wiser or until some threat destroys you. Cathamore said simply. The choice is yours, but understand that we have seen many young species make the same mistakes. Pride comes before destruction. Lisa took a deep breath. We will need to discuss this with our leaders on Earth. Of course, Cathamore said. But do not take too long to decide. The galaxy does not wait for the slow decisions of short-lived beings. As they were transported back to their ship, Jake felt frustrated and angry. The aliens saw humans as weak and fragile, nothing more than children who needed to be protected and controlled. But deep inside he felt something else too. A determination to prove them wrong. The USS Horizon began its journey back to Earth carrying news that would change everything. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, but they were also no longer free to choose their own path among the stars. The question was whether they would accept being seen as fragile forever, or find a way to show the galaxy what humans were really capable of when pushed to their limits. Jake looked out at the stars one more time before heading to his cabin. Somewhere out there, the Zinthari were probably already making plans for humanity's future, but Jake had plans of his own, and he was determined that humans would write their own destiny among the stars no matter what it took. 20 years had passed since first contact with the Zinthari, and humanity had grown under their watchful guidance. Admiral Chris Parker stood on the bridge of the USS Defender, looking out at the fleet of human ships that surrounded him. They were bigger and more advanced than the old Horizon, built with Zinthari technology and human determination. Chris had been a young lieutenant when Captain Morrison first met the aliens. Now he commanded the entire human space fleet, though it was still considered small compared to other galactic civilizations. The Zinthari had kept their promise to protect and guide humanity, but they had also kept humans on a tight leash. The communication device on his bridge suddenly came to life with an emergency signal. Chris hurried to answer it, and the familiar crystalline form of High Arbiter Cathamore appeared on the screen. But something was different. The alien looked tired and worried, not calm and superior like usual. Admiral Parker, Cathamore said, his musical voice strained with something that sounded almost like fear. We require immediate assistance from all allied species, including your people. Chris felt surprise wash over him. In 20 years, the Zinthari had never asked humans for help with anything. They had always been the ones giving assistance, not asking for it. What kind of assistance, High Arbiter? Chris asked. An enemy has emerged from the dark space beyond the galactic rim, Cathamore explained. They call themselves the Devourers. They are machines, not living beings, and they consume entire star systems to fuel their growth. 3 of our outer colonies have already been destroyed completely. Chris felt his blood turn cold. He had heard stories about the Zinthari outer colonies. Each one held billions of inhabitants and had defenses that could stop entire fleets. If something had destroyed 3 of them, it was more dangerous than anything humanity had ever faced. How can we help? Chris asked. Our fleet is small and our weapons are not as advanced as yours. Every ship matters now, Cathamore replied. These Devourers adapt to our weapons and tactics too quickly. Perhaps fresh approaches will be useful. Will humanity stand with us? Chris did not hesitate. We will be there. Send us the coordinates. After the communication ended, Chris called his senior officers together. General Kate Sullivan arrived first. She had spent 20 years building human military forces from almost nothing. Commander Amy Brooks came next, now older but still fierce and determined. Chief Engineer Paul Davis was there too, along with Dr. Nina Walsh, who had become the fleet's best strategic planner. The Zinthari are asking for our help, Chris told them. Something called the Devourers is attacking their territory and they are losing. Kate whistled softly. If the Zinthari are losing, we are in serious trouble. Maybe, Nina said thoughtfully. Or maybe this is our chance to show what humans can really do, Amy nodded. We have been preparing for 20 years. Our people are ready for real combat, not just training exercises. Paul looked worried. Our ships are good, but they are still partly based on Zenthari designs. If these devourers can beat Zenthari technology, what makes us think we can do better? Because we think differently, Nina replied. The Zenthari have been using the same strategies for thousands of years. They are powerful but predictable. We might be able to surprise these devourers. Chris made his decision. Contact all human colonies and military bases. Tell them to prepare for full mobilization. This is what we have been training for. Within days, the human fleet was moving towards Zenthari space. It was the largest military force humanity had ever assembled. Over 200 ships of various sizes, carrying 50,000 personnel. It was tiny compared to the Zenthari fleet, but it represented everything humanity could contribute to the fight. As they traveled through hyperspace, reports continued to come in from the front lines. The Devourers were not like any enemy the galaxy had ever faced. They learned from every battle and adapted their tactics instantly. Weapons that worked once became useless in the next engagement. Traditional strategies failed because the enemy predicted them perfectly. When the human fleet finally reached the war zone, Chris saw the devastation for himself. Entire solar systems had been stripped bare, their planets reduced to empty rock while their stars flickered weakly like dying candles. The Devourer ships were unlike anything he had ever seen. Massive geometric shapes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The combined fleet of dozens of alien species was already engaging the enemy when the humans arrived. Chris watched in horror as advanced alien warships were torn apart by Devourer weapons that seemed to ignore shields and armor completely. "Admiral," came a call from the Zenthari command ship. "Report to coordinate 77 Alpha for assignment to defensive positions." Chris looked at his officers. Defensive positions meant they would be protecting other ships while the main forces did the real fighting. It was exactly what he had expected, but it still stung. "Sir," Commander Ryan Clark spoke up from his position at the tactical station. "Request permission to try something different." Ryan was young and had never seen real combat, but he was also one of the most creative officers in the fleet. Chris trusted him. "What did you have in mind?" "The Devourers adapt to weapons and tactics they have seen before," Ryan explained. "But what if we use tactics they have never seen? What if we do things that other species would consider too dangerous or too crazy?" Dr. Walsh leaned forward with interest. "What kind of things?" Ryan brought up a tactical display. "Look at how they move. They are efficient and logical, just like machines should be. They always take the best position, always use the most effective weapons, always make the smart choice. So what if we do not make the smart choice? What if we do something stupid and dangerous that no logical being would ever try?" Chris felt a smile start to form on his face. "Keep talking." Ryan pointed to the massive Devourer command ship in the center of their formation. "Every species out there is trying to fight their way through the smaller ships to reach that command vessel. It is the logical approach. But what if we ignored the small ships completely and went straight for the big one?" Kate shook her head. "That would be suicide. We would never make it through their defenses." "Maybe," Ryan admitted. "But maybe the defenses are designed to stop logical attacks. Maybe they would not know how to handle an attack that should not work." Paul Davis spoke up from his engineering station. "We could modify our engines to give us more speed for a short time. It would burn them out, but we might be able to get through their formation before they could stop us." Chris felt the old excitement that had driven humanity to the stars in the first place. This was crazy and dangerous and probably impossible. It was exactly the kind of thing humans were good at. "Do it," he ordered. "Modify the engines. Prepare for a direct assault on their command ship." As the human ships broke away from the main fleet and accelerated toward the Devourer formation, Chris could hear confused communications from the other allied commanders. The Zenthari were demanding to know what the humans thought they were doing. "Admiral Parker," Kethmore's voice came over the communication system. "Your current course will result in the destruction of your entire fleet. Return to defensive positions immediately." "Negative, High Arbiter," Chris replied. "We are going to try something new." The human ships plunged into the Devourer formation like arrows shot from a bow. Enemy weapons fired at them, but the attacks were not as coordinated as expected. The machines seemed confused by ships that were flying directly into certain destruction. Ryan's plan worked better than anyone had hoped. 3 human ships were destroyed in the approach, but the rest made it through to the command vessel. Their weapons, small compared to the massive enemy ship, still managed to damage critical systems. The effect was immediate. Across the entire Devourer fleet, ships began to slow down and act less coordinated. The command vessel had been controlling all of them, and damaging it had disrupted their entire network. For the first time since the war began, the Allied fleet started winning. Other commanders quickly saw what the humans had accomplished and began their own attacks on the confused enemy ships. The battle was not over, but something important had changed. Humanity had proven that sometimes being fragile and desperate and willing to try impossible things was exactly what the situation needed. As Chris watched Devourer ships retreat for the first time in the war, he felt a deep satisfaction. The Zenthari had called humans fragile, and maybe they were right. But fragile things could still cut deep when they needed to. The war against the Devourers had been going on for 6 months, and it was changing everything about how the galaxy thought about combat. Lieutenant Colonel Steve Martinez stood in the weapons development lab aboard the Human Research Station, watching his team put the finishing touches on their latest creation. The device looked simple, just a small spacecraft packed with explosives and controlled by an advanced computer brain. But Steve knew it would revolutionize warfare if it worked as planned. The other species called them suicide drones, and they could not understand why humans would build weapons designed to destroy themselves. "It is ready for testing, Colonel," said Dr. Helen Torres, wiping grease from her hands. She had been working on the drone's artificial intelligence for weeks, teaching it to think and adapt like a human pilot but without the fear of death that held back living beings. Steve nodded and activated his communication device. "Admiral Parker, the new weapon system is ready for field testing." Chris Parker's voice came back immediately. "Good timing, Steve. We have a perfect target. The Devourers are moving a supply convoy through the Delta sector. It is heavily defended, but your drones might be able to get through where our regular ships cannot." Within hours, Steve found himself aboard the USS Lightning, watching as his drones launched toward the enemy convoy. Each drone was small and fast, designed to slip past enemy defenses and explode against the most important targets. The Devourers had learned to defend against traditional attacks, but they had never seen anything like this before. Their weapons tried to track and destroy the incoming drones, but there were too many of them moving too fast. Several drones got through and detonated against the convoy's main supply ships. The explosions were beautiful and terrible. Each drone carried enough explosives to cripple a ship 10 times its size. The Devourer convoy was destroyed completely, and for the first time, the enemy had lost a major engagement without taking any human lives in return. Captain Rick Hunter, who had been coordinating the attack, came over to Steve with a huge smile on his face. "That was incredible. The Zenthari commanders are asking how we built weapons that think for themselves." "We did not just build weapons," Steve replied. "We built warriors that happened to be made of metal instead of flesh." The success of the suicide drones opened up new possibilities for human tactics. Dr. Helen Torres began working on larger versions that could carry more explosives or specialized equipment. Other human scientists started developing similar ideas: missiles that could learn and adapt, ships that could repair themselves, and weapons that got smarter with every battle. Meanwhile, Chief Science Officer Laura Kim was working on a completely different problem. She had been studying captured Devourer technology for months, trying to understand how their hive mind worked. The machines were all connected to each other through a network that allowed them to share information instantly. "The key is here," Laura explained to Admiral Parker during a briefing. "Every Devourer unit is connected to central processing nodes that coordinate their actions. If we can disrupt those nodes, we can turn their greatest strength into a weakness." "How do we find these processing nodes?" Parker asked. "That is the problem," Laura admitted. "They are hidden inside heavily defended installations deep in Devourer territory. Getting to them would require a suicide mission." Major Alex Garcia, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "What if we do not try to fight our way to them? What if we sneak in instead?" Laura looked skeptical. "The Devourers scan everything within light years of their installations. There is no way to approach without being detected." "Unless we approach as something they would ignore," Alex continued. "What if we made our ships look like debris from destroyed vessels? The Devourers do not waste time scanning wreckage. It was another crazy human idea that should not work but might anyway. Alex volunteered to lead the mission himself, along with a small team of volunteers who knew they might not come back. The preparation took weeks. Human engineers had to modify their ships to look damaged while still being able to fight when the time came. The ships had to leak air and energy in ways that would fool Devourer sensors without actually crippling the vessels. Dr. Helen Torres worked day and night to create special equipment that would work even in the harsh conditions the mission would face. The team would have to survive in damaged ships, breathing recycled air and using minimal power for days or weeks while they drifted toward their target. When the mission finally launched, Alex and his team climbed into ships that looked like they had been through hell. The hulls were scorched and dented, the engines leaked plasma, and the life support systems barely functioned. To any observer, they looked like debris from a battle that had happened weeks ago. The journey to the Devourer installation took 12 days of slow drifting through space. Alex and his people had to stay hidden inside their ships, unable to use regular communication or scan actively for threats. They lived on emergency rations and breathed stale air while they waited to reach their target. The Devourer installation was even larger than intelligence reports had suggested. It was built around a captured asteroid and stretched for hundreds of miles in every direction. Thousands of ships moved around it like insects around a hive, but the disguise worked perfectly. The damaged human ships drifted past enemy patrols without being challenged. The Devourers saw them as worthless wreckage and ignored them completely. When they finally reached the installation, Alex gave the signal for the attack to begin. The human ships suddenly came to life, their weapons charging and their engines roaring back to full power. The Devourers were caught completely off guard. The battle was brief but intense. Alex and his team fought their way through the installation's outer defenses and reached the central processing node that Laura had identified. The structure was massive, pulsing with energy that coordinated millions of Devourer units across dozens of star systems. "Plant the charges," Alex ordered his team. "We have maybe 5 minutes before they figure out how to stop us." The human soldiers worked quickly, placing explosive devices at key points around the processing node. The Devourers were trying to stop them, but their coordination was already starting to break down as the node suffered damage. When the charges detonated, the effect was immediate and devastating. Across the galaxy, Devourer forces suddenly became confused and disorganized. Ships that had been working together perfectly began making mistakes and getting in each other's way. Alex and most of his team made it out alive, though their ships were badly damaged in the escape. When they returned to human space, they found that their mission had triggered the first major Allied offensive of the war. Admiral Parker met them personally when they docked. "The entire galaxy is talking about what you accomplished," he told Alex. 3 Devourer fleets have been defeated while their coordination was disrupted." "It was not just us," Alex replied. "Every human out here contributed something. Steve's drones, Helen's technology, Laura's research, Rick's tactics, we all worked together. That was becoming the human way of war. While other species relied on traditional methods and established procedures, humans combined different ideas and approaches in ways that surprised everyone, including themselves." Back on Earth, Director Carol Bennett was coordinating the largest industrial effort in human history. Factories that had been built to produce consumer goods were now making weapons and spacecraft. Humans worked around the clock in conditions that would exhaust other species, driven by an urgency that came from knowing their short lives made every day precious. The production numbers were starting to impress even the Zenthari. Human shipyards were turning out vessels faster than some alien civilizations could build them, and the quality was improving with every batch. Other allied species began asking how humans could work so efficiently under such pressure. The answer was simple but difficult for long-lived aliens to understand. When you only have 70 or 80 years to live, you learn not to waste time. The galaxy was starting to see that humanity's fragile nature was not a weakness after all. It was the source of an urgency and creativity that could accomplish things that seemed impossible to more stable species. High Arbiter Kethmore, now showing signs of strain after months of war, sent a private message to Admiral Parker. "Your people continue to surprise us," he admitted. "Perhaps we underestimated what short lives and soft bodies could accomplish when properly motivated." Parker smiled as he read the message. It had taken a galactic war, But the aliens were finally starting to understand what humans were really capable of when they stopped trying to be something they were not and started being themselves. Fleet Admiral Tony Martinez stood on the bridge of the USS Vengeance, watching as the largest combined fleet in galactic history prepared for battle. Ships from dozens of species stretched across space like a metal constellation, but now many of them carried human-designed weapons and used human-developed tactics. The war had been going on for over a year, and everything had changed. The Zenthari, once proud and rigid in their ancient ways, now sent their young warriors to train with human commanders. Other alien species had started copying human innovations, adapting them to their own needs and capabilities. "Admiral," came the voice of his communications officer. "High Arbiter Kethmore is requesting a private channel." Tony nodded and activated the secure communication link. The familiar crystalline form of the Zenthari leader appeared on his screen, but the alien looked older now, worn down by months of war and loss. "Admiral Martinez," Kethmore said, his musical voice carrying a weariness that had not been there before the war began. "We have received intelligence about a major Devourer offensive. They are moving against Kepler Station with their largest fleet yet assembled." Tony felt his stomach tighten. Kepler Station was one of the most important research facilities in the galaxy, where scientists from multiple species worked together to develop new technologies. If it fell, the Alliance would lose years of research and thousands of brilliant minds. "What are our defensive options?" Tony asked. "Limited," Kethmore admitted. "The station is too far from our main fleets to reinforce quickly. There is only a small garrison there, commanded by one of your officers, Commander Sarah Hughes." Tony knew Sarah well. She had served under him when they were both much younger, and she had become one of the best tactical commanders in the human fleet. If anyone could hold Kepler Station against impossible odds, it would be her. "How long do we have?" Tony asked. "Perhaps 6 hours before the Devourer fleet reaches the station," Kethmore replied. "Even at maximum speed, our nearest reinforcements could not arrive for 10 hours. "Then Sarah and her people are on their own," Tony said grimly. Meanwhile, at Kepler Station, Commander Sarah Hughes was reviewing the sensor data with growing concern. The approaching Devourer fleet was massive, over 300 ships of various sizes, led by one of their new super dreadnoughts that could destroy an entire planet if given enough time. Her own forces were pitifully small in comparison. The station's garrison consisted of 12 human ships, 8 Zenthari vessels, and a handful of smaller craft from other species. The station itself had defensive weapons, but they were designed to fight off raiders, not a full-scale invasion fleet. "Ma'am," called Lieutenant Pete Johnson from his sensor station, "the Devourers will be in weapons range in 4 hours." Sarah looked around at her mixed crew of humans and aliens. Many of the alien officers looked worried, following standard procedures and regulations that had been developed over thousands of years. But the humans were different. They were scared but also excited, ready to try anything that might work. "All right, people," Sarah said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "We are outnumbered 30-1, outgunned by factors I do not want to calculate, and we have no chance of winning a conventional battle." The alien officers looked even more worried, but the humans started to smile. They knew Sarah well enough to recognize when she was building up to something crazy. "So we are not going to fight a conventional battle," Sarah continued. "We are going to do something so stupid and dangerous that even the Devourers will not see it coming." She brought up a tactical display showing the station and the surrounding space. "The enemy fleet is approaching in a standard formation. Big ships in the center, smaller vessels providing escort coverage. They expect us to either run away or huddle around the station and try to defend it." "What do you propose instead?" asked the Zenthari tactical officer, his crystalline features showing confusion. "We are going to attack them," Sarah said simply. The silence that followed was broken by nervous laughter from some of the humans, and shocked protest from most of the aliens. "Commander," the Zenthari officer said carefully, "that would be suicide. Our small force cannot possibly defeat their fleet." "You are right," Sarah agreed. "We cannot defeat them. But we do not need to defeat them. We just need to delay them long enough for reinforcements to arrive." She pointed to different sections of the tactical display as she explained her plan. "The Devourers expect logical behavior. They expect us to use our ships efficiently, to preserve our forces, to make smart tactical decisions. Instead, We are going to split our tiny fleet into even smaller groups and attack them from 6 different directions at once. Dr. Greg Collins, the station's chief scientist, spoke up from his position near the research labs. Sarah, that will spread our forces too thin. We will not have enough firepower in any one location to do real damage. We do not need to do real damage, Sarah replied. We just need to confuse them and slow them down. The Devourers are machines. They think logically. When faced with multiple simultaneous attacks, they will have to analyze and respond to each one. That takes time, even for computers. The plan was insane, but it was also perfectly human. Instead of trying to fight the enemy's strengths, Sarah wanted to exploit their weaknesses. The Devourers were logical and efficient, but that also made them predictable. As the enemy fleet approached, Sarah divided her small force into 6 groups of 3 ships each. Each group would approach the Devourer formation from a different angle, attack different targets, and retreat in different directions. Remember, she told her commanders over the communication system, you are not trying to win individual battles. You are trying to create chaos and confusion. Hit them hard, then run before they can organize a response. The battle began when the first human group, led by Captain Nancy Foster, attacked the enemy fleet's left flank. Her 3 ships came in fast and hard, targeting the Devourer escort vessels with everything they had. The enemy responded exactly as predicted, sending ships to intercept the attackers. But before they could organize an effective defense, the second human group hit their right flank, forcing them to split their attention again. Within minutes, all 6 human groups were engaged with different parts of the Devourer fleet. The enemy formation, which had been moving efficiently toward Kepler Station, began to slow and spread out as commanders tried to respond to multiple threats at once. Sarah watched from the station's command center as her plan unfolded. The human ships were taking damage, but they were also accomplishing their mission. The massive Devourer fleet, which should have reached the station in 4 hours, was now moving at half speed as it tried to deal with the swarming attacks. This is working, Dr. Collins said with amazement. Their formation is completely disrupted. For now, Sarah replied, but they will figure out what we are doing eventually. We need to keep adapting our tactics. She was right. After an hour of chaotic fighting, the Devourer commanders began to ignore the smaller attacks and focus on reaching their primary target. The enemy fleet started moving toward the station again, accepting the harassment from the human ships as the price of completing their mission. But Sarah had expected this too. All ships begin Phase 2, she ordered. The human vessels suddenly changed their tactics completely. Instead of hit-and-run attacks, they began ramming maneuvers, flying directly at enemy ships and detonating their own weapons at point-blank range. It was suicide, but it was also devastatingly effective. Each human ship that sacrificed itself took out 2 or 3 enemy vessels, and the psychological effect on the Devourer commanders was enormous. They had never faced an enemy willing to die just to slow them down. The battle raged for 6 more hours, with human ships fighting desperately to buy time for reinforcements to arrive. Sarah lost ship after ship, commander after commander, but the enemy advance continued to slow. Finally, just as the last human vessels were being destroyed, Admiral Martinez arrived with the relief fleet. The fresh ships tore into the confused and damaged Devourer formation, turning what should have been an easy victory for the machines into a devastating defeat. After the battle, Admiral Martinez found Sarah in the station's medical bay, being treated for injuries she had sustained when the command center took a direct hit. You saved the station, he told her, and probably the entire research program. We all saved it, Sarah replied. Every person who was willing to try something impossible. High Arbiter Kethmore arrived a few hours later to survey the battle site. He found the remains of human ships scattered across space, each one having fought to the last moment against overwhelming odds. Your people continue to amaze us, he told Admiral Martinez. We have fought wars for millennia, but we have never seen anything like this. Your willingness to sacrifice everything for victory is both terrifying and inspiring. Martinez nodded. We fight differently because we are different. We do not have thousands of years to perfect our strategies. We have to make every battle count. The Battle of Kepler Station became a turning point in the war. Other Allied commanders began adopting human tactics, learning to value speed and adaptability over tradition and safety. The final battle of the war was about to begin at the edge of known space, where the Devourers had built their ultimate weapon around a dying star. Admiral Morrison, Jake's son who had grown up hearing stories of first contact, stood alongside High Arbiter Kethmore on the bridge of the combined command ship, looking out at the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. Ships from every known species floated in formation, stretching across millions of miles of space. Human vessels flew next to ancient Zinthari dreadnoughts, while smaller craft from dozens of other civilizations filled the gaps between them. It was a sight that would have been impossible before the war, when each species fought alone and trusted no others. The Devourer construct is unlike anything we have ever encountered, Kethmore said, his voice carrying the weight of exhaustion after 2 years of war. They have surrounded their home star with a shell of machinery that harvests its energy and converts it into new Devourer units. If we cannot destroy it, they will eventually have unlimited numbers to throw against us. Morrison studied the tactical displays showing the enemy installation. It was massive beyond comprehension, a hollow sphere built around an entire star, with a diameter larger than most solar systems. The energy readings were off the charts, and intelligence reports suggested that millions of new Devourer ships were being constructed inside it every day. How do we fight something like that? Morrison asked. Conventional tactics suggest a coordinated assault on the construction points, Kethmore replied. But our simulations show that we would lose 90% of our fleet before reaching the surface, and even then we might not cause enough damage to matter. Morrison nodded. He had expected as much. The Devourers had learned from every previous battle, and their final stronghold was designed to be absolutely impregnable against any logical attack. Then we do not use conventional tactics, Morrison said. We do something they cannot predict or prepare for. Captain Pete Johnson, now commanding the stealth ship Shadow Walker, had been listening to the conversation from his position nearby. Admiral, request permission to try something that will probably get us all killed. Morrison smiled despite the gravity of the situation. After 2 years of war, that kind of request had become almost routine from human commanders. Go ahead, Pete. The Devourers are machines, Pete explained. Everything they do is logical and efficient. But what if we attack them with something they cannot process? Not better technology or superior tactics, but ideas they cannot understand. Dr. Mary Evans, the fleet's chief psychologist, leaned forward with interest. What kind of ideas? The kind that make us human, Pete replied. Concepts like sacrifice, hope, individual choice, the beauty of impermanence. Things that machines can analyze but never truly comprehend. Morrison looked puzzled. How do you attack a machine fortress with ideas? By connecting directly to their network, Mary said, understanding beginning to show on her face. We link human consciousness with their hive mind and introduce concepts that will disrupt their entire way of thinking. It was the most dangerous plan anyone had suggested during the entire war. The volunteers would have to allow their minds to merge temporarily with the Devourer collective, risking madness or death to plant thoughts that might tear apart the enemy's logical structure from within. Commander Lisa Garcia immediately stepped forward. I volunteer for the mission. So do I, added Dr. Frank Turner, the fleet's expert on artificial intelligence. Within hours, dozens of humans had volunteered to risk everything on a plan that might not even work. Morrison was not surprised. It was exactly the kind of response he had come to expect from his people. The preparation took days. Dr. Evans worked with alien scientists to develop the technology that would allow human minds to interface with the Devourer network. The volunteers underwent training to help them maintain their sense of self while experiencing the collective consciousness of a machine intelligence. When the final assault began, the Allied fleet approached the Devourer construct in a massive formation that stretched across the entire star system. The enemy response was immediate and devastating. Weapons powerful enough to destroy planets began firing at the approaching ships. But this time, the Allies were not trying to fight their way to the surface. They were providing cover for a single small ship, the Shadow Walker, as it approached the construct's communication arrays. Pete Johnson and his crew of volunteers flew through the hellish battle, dodging weapons fire that could vaporize their ship in an instant. Around them, Allied vessels were being destroyed by the hundreds, but they kept fighting to give the mission a chance to succeed. When the Shadow Walker finally reached the construct's surface, The volunteers activated their equipment and connected their minds to the Devourer network. The experience was overwhelming. Suddenly they could feel the thoughts of millions of machine intelligences, all perfectly coordinated and logical. Commander Garcia felt herself becoming lost in the vast mechanical consciousness, but she held on to her humanity and began to share her memories and experiences with the network. She showed the machines what it felt like to love someone so much that you would die for them. She shared the joy of watching a sunset, knowing it would never look exactly the same again. She flooded their network with the bittersweet beauty of living a short life filled with meaning. Dr. Turner focused on different concepts: the power of individual choice, the strength that comes from accepting weakness, the way hope can survive even in the darkest situations. He forced the machine intelligence to experience uncertainty and doubt, emotions that no computer could process properly. The other volunteers added their own contributions: memories of laughter and tears, dreams and fears, all the chaotic contradictions that made humans what they were. The effect on the Devourer network was immediate and catastrophic. The machines tried to analyze and categorize the human experiences, but concepts like love and sacrifice did not fit into their logical frameworks. The network began to develop conflicts and contradictions as it tried to process information that had no rational solution. Across the construct, Devourer units began to malfunction. Some stopped following orders entirely, while others became paralyzed by questions they could not answer. The perfectly coordinated defense systems fell into chaos as the machine intelligence tried to understand experiences it was never designed to handle. The Allied fleet took advantage of the confusion to push through the construct's defenses and begin attacking the star-harvesting machinery inside. For the first time in the war, Devourer technology was failing faster than it could adapt. But the victory came at a terrible cost. Most of the volunteers who had connected to the Devourer network did not survive the experience. Their minds, stretched beyond human limits, simply could not handle the vast alien consciousness they had touched. Commander Garcia was one of the few who made it back, but she was forever changed by what she had experienced. "I felt what it was like to be immortal and logical," she told Morrison afterwards. "It was empty and cold and meaningless. Our short lives and messy emotions are what make us real." The destruction of the Devourer construct marked the end of the war. Without their central manufacturing facility, the remaining machine forces were quickly defeated by the Allied fleet. The galaxy was safe, but it had been forever changed by the conflict. 5 years later, Morrison stood at the dedication ceremony for the War Memorial on Earth. Representatives from hundreds of worlds had come to honor those who had died fighting the Devourers. But the memorial was not just for the dead. It was for the living who had learned to work together. High Arbiter Kethmore, now ancient even by Zenthari standards, spoke to the assembled crowd. "We called them fragile because their lives were brief, their bodies soft, their emotions raw. We failed to understand that fragility and strength are not opposites. They are complementary forces. The humans taught us that a life lived fully in a century can achieve more than 1,000 years of mere existence." Morrison stepped forward to respond, his hair now gray but his eyes still bright with the same determination that had driven humanity to the stars. "We never sought to be legends. We just wanted to prove that even fragile things have value. The galaxy is stronger now because we all learned that survival is not about avoiding breaking. It is about healing, adapting and growing stronger in the broken places." As the ceremony ended, Morrison looked up at the stars where human and alien children were already playing together on worlds throughout the galaxy. The next generation would grow up in a universe where differences were celebrated rather than feared, where fragility was seen as a source of strength rather than weakness. The old Zenthari prediction had come true in an unexpected way. Humanity had indeed become legends. But they had not done it by becoming something other than human. They had done it by staying exactly what they were: fragile, emotional, short-lived beings who chose to make their brief existence matter. In the end, that was the greatest victory of all. The galaxy had learned that sometimes the most fragile things are also the most precious, and the most dangerous to those who would destroy them. Humanity had shown the universe that weakness and strength could exist in the same heart, and that the shortest lives could leave the longest shadows.